Elijah Arnold believed he had life perfectly mapped out. At 37, he was worth nearly $1.8 billion. The fortune built on the chain of luxury hotels that bore his name across the world's most coveted cities. From his penthouse high above Chicago, the glittering skyline stretched before him like a kingdom of glass and steel, one he ruled without question. His days began with precision. At 4 each morning, the alarm sliced through the quiet, pulling him into a workout that demanded both discipline and pain. By 6, he was dressed in bespoke suits, skimming profit reports while sipping his ritual cup of black coffee. His calendar was relentless, filled with meetings that dictated not only the course of his empire, but the direction of entire industries. To the outside world, Elijah was the embodiment of success. Headlines praised his business instincts, investors trusted his judgment, and rivals watched his every move with equal parts envy and fear. He had built a reputation for control, for efficiency, for winning every battle placed before him. Yet beneath the polished surface, success had hardened into something else, a routine masquerading as fulfillment. The wealth, the power, the admiration, it created a fortress that few could penetrate, and even fewer dared to. Elijah mistook security for happiness, convinced his empire was enough. But life has a way of dismantling illusions. And for Elijah Arnold, the night was coming when everything he thought he knew about success and about himself would be challenged. He had expected to endure a few polite conversations and make a discreet exit. Instead, his attention snagged on a woman standing alone before a painting, her gaze fixed as if she were lost inside the brushstrokes. Delila Kennedy! She wasn't like the women he usually dated, the polished socialites who spoke in rehearsed compliments and smiled like they were being paid by the hour. Delila radiated something different. Her curls caught the soft glow of the lanterns. Wearing a simple sundress, she carried herself with effortless confidence. When she finally turned, her smile wasn't practiced. It was startling, unguarded, the kind that reached her eyes. For a man accustomed to boardroom strategies and predictable outcomes, Elijah felt an unfamiliar jolt. In that single moment, surrounded by art and music, he sensed the beginning of something his empire could never prepare him for. Delila stood completely absorbed by a single canvas, her posture relaxed yet intent, as though the painting spoke to her in a language only she could understand. She didn't glance around to see who might be watching, didn't pose or preen. She simply was. That unstudied authenticity struck him harder than he cared to admit. When she finally moved, stepping closer to examine the artist's signature, Elijah seized the moment. "Most people glance at art for a few seconds," he said, his voice even but edged with curiosity. "You've been standing here for nearly 20 minutes. Either the artist owes you money or you see something the rest of us can't." Delila turned, startled at first, then amused. Her smile, bright, genuine, lit her features in a way that felt entirely disarming. "Or maybe," she countered, tilting her head toward the canvas, "you've forgotten how to slow down long enough to see." The remark caught him off guard. People rarely spoke to Elijah Arnold like that, without deference, without calculation. Yet there was no malice in her tone, only honesty. For the first time in years, he felt the faintest crack in his carefully constructed armor. That night, the skyline glittered outside Elijah's penthouse windows. But for the first time in years, the city's brilliance failed to impress him. He poured himself a glass of scotch, settled into the leather armchair facing the endless stretch of lights, and tried to focus on the stack of reports waiting on his desk. Numbers had always calmed him, predictable, unyielding, but the columns of figures blurred into irrelevance. Instead, his mind replayed the scene at the Riverwalk. Delila Kennedy, the woman who had looked straight at him, listened to his polished observation, and without hesitation returned it with something far more disarming: honesty. Her words had rubbed against his pride, forcing him to reflect in ways he wasn't used to. What unsettled him most wasn't her remark, it was the smile that followed. An honest smile, Not mocking, not cruel, simply unbothered. She had judged his life in a single sentence and walked away as though she had something better to do. As if Elijah Arnold, billionaire hotelier, was not worth more than a passing exchange. She must not have realized who he was. That had to be it. No one who truly knew his power, his influence, would dismiss him so lightly. The thought should have calmed his ego, but it didn't. It only grew sharper. For 2 days, the memory needled him. He replayed her words during board meetings, found himself distracted during investor calls, and caught his temper rising in moments he normally would have handled with icy control. Her voice, her presence, her unshaken indifference, it all demanded resolution. By the 3rd morning, Elijah made a decision. If Delila Kennedy could walk away from him so easily, then he would find her. He needed to confront the dismissal, to understand why her honesty unsettled him more than any rival or business threat ever had. Elijah didn't have to search long. With his resources, finding someone in Chicago's art scene was little more than a phone call and a discreet inquiry. Still, when the address came back, an old brick building converted into studios along the edge of a revitalized neighborhood, he felt a flicker of anticipation he hadn't known in years. Inside, the air smelled faintly of turpentine and varnish. Canvases leaned against the walls, each one alive with bold strokes and vivid colors. It was a far cry from the sterile boardrooms and polished hotel lobbies he was used to. He was out of his element here, and strangely he felt it. "Delila, you've got a guest," Amy called from the front desk, her voice echoing down the narrow hallway. "Send them in," Delila replied, her tone casual, distracted. She didn't even turn fully when Elijah stepped through the doorway. With her back to him, brush in hand, she gave him only the briefest glance over her shoulder. "Oh, it's you. How can I help you, Mr. Arnold?" The words hit him harder than he expected. No surprise, no awe, just recognition and mild indifference. His brow lifted. "You know who I am?" "Yes," she said simply, dabbing her brush into a mixture of ochre and blue. "You seem to be everywhere." He cleared his throat, feeling uncharacteristically unsettled. "Ms. Kennedy, you never gave me your input on that painting at the festival." She didn't stop painting. Her strokes were steady, deliberate. "Why would it matter? Only your thoughts matter, don't they?" She paused, then added, "So again, how can I help you? Or are you here to put me in my place because I didn't fall at your feet when we met?" That stopped him. She finally turned, her gaze locking onto his. Her eyes were sharp, not cruel, but unflinchingly honest. It was the same look she had given him that night. Direct, unapologetic. He hesitated, unused to being disarmed. "You were honest, direct. I needed to know more about you. You left me wondering." Delila tilted her head, studying him for a moment as though deciding whether he deserved the truth. Then she turned back to her canvas. "Well, Mr. Arnold, in short, I'm 33 years old. I have 2 children, 5-year-old twins. I've been divorced for 6 years. My husband left when I was pregnant. He said he had better things to do in life, and then married his 21-year-old assistant 6 months after the divorce." Her brush moved again, steady, almost defiant. "This is my living and my hobby. My children are my life, and I don't have time for much of anything else. Does that satisfy your wondering?" Elijah stood silent, her words settling heavily in the air. For once, he had no rehearsed response, no clever retort. She had offered him more than an answer. She had given him a glimpse of a world entirely unlike his own. Finally, he inclined his head. "Thank you for your time. I hope to see you again." Delila placed her brush down, her lips curving into the faintest of polite smiles. "Goodbye, Mr. Arnold. Enjoy your day." He left the studio with the scent of paint lingering in his lungs and the echo of her honesty lodged in his chest. Unsure why walking away felt so much harder than staying. That evening, she sat cross-legged on the living room floor while her children, Noah and Naomi, built towers out of colorful blocks. Their laughter filled the modest space, brighter and more fulfilling than the applause of any gallery could ever be. "Mommy, look!" Naomi beamed, balancing the last block on a wobbling tower. Delila clapped, her eyes warm. "That's amazing, sweetheart. Careful, it's taller than you are." She had grown used to the rhythm of their little world, Mornings of cereal and mismatched socks. Afternoons juggling paintbrushes and playdates. Nights of bedtime stories whispered beneath glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. Yet, as her children tumbled into her arms, she felt a shadow of distraction, an image of Elijah Arnold standing in her studio, his expensive suit out of place among canvases and paint-splattered floors. She had dismissed him, but his curiosity still lingered in her thoughts, and that unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. The bell above the bakery door chimed as Elijah stepped inside, the warm scent of cinnamon and fresh bread instantly reminding him this was no boardroom. He was used to polished lobbies, marble floors, and staff trained to cater to every whim. Here, children's laughter floated from the corner. A radio hummed softly with jazz, and life moved at a pace he couldn't control. Delila stood near the counter, her curls pulled into a loose bun, sleeves rolled to her elbows as she helped her twins pick out muffins. When her gaze lifted and landed on him, she didn't flinch or fawn. She simply exhaled, as if she'd expected this. "Mr. Arnold," she said evenly, her voice carrying through the cozy space. "I know you just can't shake the fact that I'm indifferent to you. So let me explain." He straightened, caught off guard by her unyielding tone. Delila continued without hesitation, her words precise, cutting, but delivered with the calm of someone who had nothing to prove. "I helped my husband build his company fresh out of college. I once walked in the world you live in, the late nights, the endless parties, the flattering lies. And when he began looking at other women, I noticed. I kept my mouth shut, told myself it was just a phase. He thought I was too busy with my little art projects to notice." Her eyes flicked to Elijah's, sharp and unwavering. "But betrayal has a way of sharpening you. His betrayal became my greatest success. When I got finished with him, I owned 60% of his company. I made sure my children are the legal heirs to his current and future fortune. Then I told his mistress to help him rebuild from the ashes." Elijah felt his jaw tighten as she stepped closer, her voice lowering, but her words striking like steel. "She left him within a year, but she walked away with almost nothing. My hand was everywhere in every clause, every contract. I don't play games, Mr. Arnold, so go back to your socialites. That's the world you know." For a long moment, the bakery seemed to still, the only sound the soft chatter of her children and the hiss of the espresso machine behind the counter. Elijah studied her, noting the strength carved into every word, the unflinching way she stood before him. Finally, he let out a quiet laugh, not mocking but tinged with admiration. "Mrs. Kennedy, you're right about my assumption. I thought you were fragile, art and softness and polite smiles. But listening to you now only makes me want to chase you more." Delila tilted her head, her lips curving into a smile that wasn't sweet, but sharp, deliberate. "Then I suggest you run faster, Mr. Arnold, because I'm not slowing down." She gathered the twins, her presence commanding even as she turned toward the door. Over her shoulder she added almost playfully, "Have a good day, Mr. Arnold." And just like that she was gone again, leaving Elijah standing in a bakery that suddenly felt too small for the storm she had stirred inside him. Later that evening, Delila and Amy sat at a small table in the studio, mugs of chamomile tea steaming between them. The twins were asleep in the next room, their soft breathing a reminder of everything Delila fought to protect. Amy leaned forward, her curiosity evident. "So," Amy said, eyes glinting, "the Mr. Elijah Arnold walked into the bakery today. Don't tell me you didn't feel anything." He's him," Delila shook her head, a wry smile tugging at her lips. "That's exactly the problem, Amy. He's him. Men like Elijah live in a world where people orbit around them, afraid to speak the truth. I refuse to be pulled into that," Amy frowned, "but he seems genuinely interested." "Interested?" Delilah's tone sharpened. "For men like him, interest is a challenge to conquer. I've been there before, played the supportive wife, kept my silence while my world cracked. Never again. My life isn't about grand gestures or power games anymore. It's about Noah and Naomi, about peace, about rebuilding on my own terms." Amy sighed, but nodded. Delilah's gaze softened, Elijah Arnold doesn't understand it yet, but some things can't be bought or chased, and I intend to keep it that way. 2 weeks passed before Delila heard from Elijah again. This time, it wasn't through a chance encounter or an unexpected visit. It was through Amy, who burst into the studio waving a check. "You won't believe this," Amy said breathlessly. "Elijah Arnold just purchased 10 of your paintings, full price, no negotiation, and he wants them displayed in his hotels." Delila froze, brush midair. "You're joking." Amy shook her head, grinning. "Not even close. He's already arranged for them to be shipped to Chicago, New York, and Miami. Oh, and he wants you to work with his designer on additional pieces for future properties." When Elijah arrived later that afternoon, he found Delila standing in the middle of her studio, arms folded, an incredulous smile tugging at her lips. "Why?" she asked. Before he could even speak, he leaned against the doorway, unbothered by her skepticism. "Because I looked your husband up. He stayed at some of my hotels before. I thought it might be a nice jab for him to walk into one of my lobbies and see your work hanging front and center." Delila burst out laughing, the sound rich and unrestrained. "You are awful, Mr. Arnold." "Yeah," he admitted with a half-smile, "I am. But you and your children didn't deserve to be treated the way he treated you. You're a strong, beautiful woman, Delila. Any man with good sense would be lucky to have you." Her laughter faded, and she studied him carefully. "So tell me, Mr. Arnold, why are you still chasing me?" His expression sobered, his voice low and steady. "Because you don't need me, but I need you. Someone who is honest. Someone who knows how to love fully, even after being betrayed. That's something I've been searching for, and I'm not about to let you go." He stepped closer, the air between them charged with unspoken tension. "Not ever." Delilah's chest rose with a sharp breath. For a moment, she couldn't look away from him. His intensity was overwhelming, dangerously compelling. But then she steadied herself. "Mr. Arnold." "Stop calling me Mr. Arnold," he interrupted softly. "It's Elijah." Her lips curved into a reluctant smile. "Elijah, I'm not going back into that world. I won't be involved with someone who lives in it either. I've fought too hard for peace, for happiness. My life belongs to my children, my art, and myself. That's enough for me." He held her gaze for a long, silent moment. Then slowly he nodded. "Okay, then I guess I need to make some changes in my life." Delila blinked, startled by the sincerity in his tone. For the first time, Elijah didn't sound like a billionaire who could bend the world to his will. He sounded like a man standing on the edge of something he didn't yet understand, but was willing to leap into. The changes didn't happen overnight. For a man like Elijah Arnold, life had always been measured in quarterly gains and relentless expansion. But over the next 6 months, he forced himself to slow down. He began delegating responsibilities to the capable executives he had once kept on a tight leash. His COO, a sharp and level-headed strategist, started handling investor dinners and press appearances. Elijah told the board the truth in one of the rarest speeches of his career. "I've given you more than enough. The company is secure, profitable, and thriving. But I need to find balance in my personal life. That is where my focus will be." The transition was steady, subtle. He didn't vanish. He still reviewed reports, attended high-level meetings, and shaped the direction of his empire. But he no longer carried it alone. Slowly, his absence at social gatherings became less shocking. By the 3rd month, it was simply expected that the COO would attend events in his place. By the 6th, Elijah Arnold's name was whispered less at champagne receptions, except among the women who had once competed for his attention. They noticed, they missed him, but their interest had always been in his wealth, not in him. What surprised him most was how little he missed that world in return. Instead, he found himself drawn more often to Delilah's modest studio, where canvases leaned against paint-splattered walls and the hum of creation replaced the clinking of crystal glasses. Delila never made it easy. She challenged him with every visit, questioned his intentions, and made sure he understood that her life revolved around Noah and Naomi. But Elijah welcomed the challenge. He learned the twins' favorite games, listened to their endless questions, and even endured afternoons spent helping them build block castles that toppled more often than they stood. And as weeks turned into months, something shifted. For the first time in years, Elijah found joy in moments that weren't tied to profits or power. Watching Naomi paint with fierce concentration, or hearing Noah laugh as he told him a silly joke, those were the moments that stayed with him long after he returned to his penthouse. Elijah had spent a lifetime building an empire, but now he was quietly learning to build something far rarer, a place where he truly belonged. Delila prided herself on being cautious. For months, she had watched Elijah enter her studio without arrogance, interact with her children without impatience, and slip into their little world with a surprising gentleness. He didn't just visit, he showed up. He remembered Noah's favorite dinosaur, brought Naomi new paintbrushes when hers wore down, and even learned to sit cross-legged on the floor while listening to their endless chatter. At first, she waited for the facade to crack, certain he'd grow bored once the novelty wore off. But 6 months later, she could no longer deny what her heart already knew. This man had changed. She noticed it in the quiet way he watched her paint, in the absence of his phone buzzing during their conversations, in the unhurried patience he brought into every visit. Against her will, her guard began to slip. She found herself smiling more, lingering when he stayed, even teasing him gently. One evening, when Noah declared Elijah his second favorite grown-up, Delila laughed so hard she didn't see the flicker of hope in Elijah's eyes. But peace is a fragile thing. It happened on a rainy Saturday. The twins were at the studio, showing Elijah their latest finger-painting masterpiece, when a knock sounded at the door. Delila wiped her hands on a cloth, her stomach tightening with unease. When she opened it, her past stepped inside. Marcus Kennedy, her ex-husband, looked older, wearier, but the arrogance in his eyes hadn't dimmed. "Delila," he said smoothly, his gaze sweeping the room until it landed on Elijah. His smile turned sharp. "So the rumors were true. My children have been talking about some billionaire who plays blocks with them. Elijah Arnold, is it?" Delila stiffened, moving instinctively between Marcus and the twins. "What do you want, Marcus?" He raised his hands as if to soothe. "Relax, I just came to see my kids. I've been hearing all sorts of stories. Figured I should come see what kind of man has inserted himself into their lives." Elijah stood, his expression calm but his presence commanding. He didn't say a word, but the protective weight of his silence filled the room. Delila's pulse raced. She had fought so hard to keep her world steady, to keep Marcus's chaos away. Now with Elijah here and the twins watching wide-eyed, she knew everything was about to collide. Elijah crossed the room with the same confidence that once commanded boardrooms, but his movements were steady, deliberate, not confrontational. Extending his hand, he met Marcus with an unflinching gaze. "Elijah Arnold," he said firmly, "you have wonderful children. Bright, curious, full of life. That's a credit to their mother." Marcus gripped his hand with just enough force to test boundaries, but Elijah didn't flinch. For a flicker of a moment, something like irritation passed over Marcus's features, as though Elijah's composure denied him the power he had come expecting to wield. Before the tension could sharpen further, Delila stepped in, her voice brisk and clipped. "It's great you stopped by, Marcus," she said, ushering the twins closer. "In fact, why don't you take them for the night? They'll love spending time with you, and I'll finally get a night to myself. Maybe even relax, or," she added with pointed sweetness, "go on a date." Marcus blinked, caught off guard by her sudden generosity. "A date?" he repeated, his gaze sliding back toward Elijah. Delila's chin lifted, her eyes hard. "Yes, Marcus, a date. I believe I'm allowed those now." For a long moment the room pulsed with silence. Naomi tugged at her father's sleeve, her small voice breaking the tension. "Daddy, can we show you our painting at home?" Marcus's expression softened briefly as he looked down at his daughter, then back at Delila. "Fine," he said, his tone clipped. "I'll take them." As the twins gathered their things, Elijah stepped back, his expression unreadable. He didn't interfere, didn't challenge, but his eyes followed Delila closely, as if measuring every word she'd chosen. When the door finally shut behind Marcus and the children, the silence between them was deafening. Delila turned toward her easel, picking up a brush with more force than necessary. Elijah broke the silence first, his voice low. That was unexpected. She didn't look at him. Marcus thrives on control. I won't let him think he can rattle me. Not in front of the kids, not in front of you. Elijah studied her profile, the tension in her shoulders, the mask she wore so carefully. In that moment, admiration and something deeper tugged at him. She wasn't just strong, she was fierce, protective, unyielding. Still, he couldn't shake the sting of her words. A date. Was it meant to push Marcus or to push him away? Marcus Kennedy's penthouse was sleek but hollow, its polished surfaces reflecting a life that had once been full of power, but now felt strangely empty. The twins sat on the living room floor, Noah rolling toy cars, while Naomi flipped through a picture book. Marcus watched them with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. So, he said casually, pouring himself a drink, you two spend a lot of time with Mr. Arnold, huh? Naomi nodded without looking up. He helps us paint sometimes. He even builds towers with us, but they always fall down. She giggled. Marcus's jaw tightened. Elijah Arnold, of all people. And your mother seems happy with that? He pressed. Noah shrugged. Mommy laughs more when he's around. She says he's our friend. Marcus swirled his glass, his thoughts darkening. Delila had always been clever, always sharper than he'd given her credit for. But aligning herself with Elijah Arnold, that wasn't coincidence, it was strategy. She had taken his company once. Now she might be aiming to erase him completely, using Arnold's power to fortify her world. As the twins chattered, Marcus smiled. But inside, old habits stirred. He wasn't back for family. He was back for control. The night had been unlike anything Elijah Arnold had ever experienced. No headlines, no cameras, no polished veneer of luxury. Just music, laughter, and the gentle sway of Delila's hand in his as they danced under dim jazz club lights. For once, time had not been measured in deals struck or contracts signed, but in stolen smiles and the soft cadence of her voice. When she invited him into her home afterward, Elijah's heart had raced, not from conquest, but from the quiet significance of her trust. They had talked until dawn, sprawled on her couch, trading stories of failures, regrets, and unlikely hopes. He had made her laugh until tears glistened in her eyes, and when the sun finally rose, they were still sitting side by side, plates of toast and eggs between them. That was when the knock came. Marcus stood in the doorway with the twins in tow, his sharp eyes scanning the scene. The rumpled suits from the night before, the easy warmth between Elijah and Delila. In that instant, realization struck him. This wasn't casual. This was serious. Delila ushered the children toward the bathroom, her voice light as she coaxed them into brushing their teeth. The moment the door closed, Marcus turned, his expression hard. So what's the deal here? He demanded. Elijah rose slowly, his posture calm but unyielding. The deal, he said evenly, is that I'm going to love an incredible woman you threw away. Marcus's jaw tightened. Don't fool yourself. Delilah's up to something. She doesn't go for men like you, not unless she's making some kind of power play. That's who she is. That's who she's always been. Elijah shook his head, a hint of pity in his eyes. You really believe that, don't you? It's been 5 years since your divorce, and you still think you live in her head. But I've seen the truth. She's not scheming. She's surviving. She's raising your children with grace you'll never appreciate. And she's building a life that has nothing to do with you anymore. Marcus's nostrils flared, anger simmering just beneath the surface. You don't know her like I do. I know her better than you ever tried to, Elijah replied firmly. He stepped closer, his voice lowering but no less resolute. I plan to build a life with her and your children, not to replace you as their father. That's not my place. But I'll find my own place in their world, one they can trust and depend on. And I will never walk away from them or from her. For a long moment, Marcus searched Elijah's face, looking for weakness. But all he saw was conviction. "This I promise," Elijah finished, his tone steady as steel. "I am not letting her go, ever, because I love her. And I love your children too. We can choose to be civil to one another or not. But either way, I'm here to stay." The bathroom door creaked open, and the twins came running back into the room. Marcus's anger simmered, but for the first time, he realized Elijah Arnold wasn't a rival he could simply dismiss. He was a man prepared to fight for the family Marcus had abandoned. Delila hadn't meant to eavesdrop. But as she guided Noah and Naomi toward the bathroom, the sharp edges of Marcus's voice carried down the hall. She froze just beyond the doorway, heart pounding as Elijah's response reached her. "I am not letting her go, ever, because I love her. And I love your children too." The words hit Delila harder than she expected. She leaned against the wall, trembling. A part of her wanted to believe him, to let those words soak into the cracks of her guarded heart. But another part recoiled, warning her not to be foolish. Love had been promised to her once before, only to be shattered by betrayal. To protect herself and her children, she had learned not to trust easily. That night, after the children were asleep, Delila found Elijah sitting quietly in her living room. She hesitated, then spoke, her voice low. "Earlier, when you said those things to Marcus, did you mean them, or were you just trying to get under his skin?" Elijah looked up, startled by the question. He stood, crossing to her with deliberate calm, and took her hands in his. "Delila," he said firmly, "I'm in love with you, but I also know trust doesn't come easy for you, and I'm not asking for it all at once. I'll wait until you let me in." Her throat tightened. For so long, she had doubted anyone could mean those words again. Slowly, she whispered, "It's getting there." Then, with a courage she hadn't expected to find, Delila leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. It was brief, tentative, but it carried the weight of her first step toward hope. Delila sent a text, "Can we meet in the morning at 9 a.m. at our coffee shop?" He replied, "Yes, I will be there." The coffee shop was quiet that morning, its air filled with the rich scent of roasted beans and the soft hum of conversation. Delila sat by the window, her hands wrapped around a warm mug, watching raindrops slide down the glass. When Marcus arrived, he barely settled into the chair before the words spilled from his mouth. "He's going to hurt you," Marcus said in a rush, leaning forward, his eyes frantic. "Elijah Arnold isn't built for someone like you. He'll get bored, Delila. He'll leave you the way I—" He stopped, catching himself, but the damage was done. Delila leaned back, studying him with a calm he didn't expect. She let the silence stretch until Marcus shifted uncomfortably, then asked softly, "Do you know why I'm looking at you like this?" He frowned. "Why?" "Because, Marcus," she said evenly, "you're living in regret. I forgave you a long time ago, not for your sake, but for mine. I realized your betrayal was your choice, not my lacking. You chose to walk away, and I chose to rebuild." Marcus opened his mouth, but Delila's steady voice cut through. "You need to take time to heal from this destructive behavior. You need to stop blaming others for choices you made. And more than anything, you need to become the father your children deserve." Her words struck with quiet precision, leaving Marcus momentarily speechless. He gripped his hands tightly, but she didn't flinch, didn't soften. "At some point," she continued, "I'm going to move on. Whether it's with Elijah or with someone else, I will not look back. There's no going back to us, Marcus. That wound is too deep to renew." She stood, her chair scraping softly against the floor, and adjusted her coat. Then she smiled, not cruelly, but with the gentle finality of someone who had closed a chapter. "Have a good day, Marcus." Without waiting for a reply, she walked out into the rain, leaving him staring after her. For the first time, Marcus felt the weight of what he had lost. Not just a wife, but the chance to ever be the man she might have needed him to be. One evening over dinner, Delila asked him, "Elijah thought he'd misheard. A family trip?" He repeated, his brow raised, though a smile tugged at his lips. "Yes," Delila said, smirking at his surprise. "I want to give this a try." "A family trip will give you a look into what you're asking for. Real life. Messy, loud, and full of my relatives who will ask you far too many questions. Elijah chuckled, the warmth in his chest undeniable. Then I suppose I should start packing. The week that followed was unlike anything Elijah had ever experienced. They traveled through the South, stopping at small towns where Delilah's family welcomed him with open arms and bottomless plates of food. The twins were in heaven, chasing cousins through fields, staying up late playing board games, and falling asleep in the back seat with sticky fingers and happy faces. Elijah, for the first time in years, felt what it was to belong to a family. He was teased by Delilah's uncles, grilled by her aunties, and spoiled by her grandmother, who insisted on piling his plate with second and third helpings. When they finally returned home, Elijah leaned against her doorway, loosening his collar with an exaggerated sigh. "I think I gained 10 pounds from all the food at your folks' place." Delila laughed, her eyes sparkling. "I told you, they are the best." He watched her with a steady, quiet intensity. "When we get married, let's have it down there with them, and with plenty of food." Her laughter faltered, and she glanced at him out of the corner of her eye. "Marry?" she repeated softly. "Yes," he said, his tone unwavering. He stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "I told you, I'm not letting you go, and you need to get that planted in your head." Before she could reply, he kissed her, firm, deliberate, leaving her breathless. Then with a small, knowing smile, he walked out, his footsteps echoing in the quiet hall. Delila stood frozen, her heart racing. The word marry still lingered in the air, heavier, and though she hadn't answered, a flicker of hope stirred inside her, a dangerous, exhilarating hope she no longer wanted to push away. News of the engagement spread quickly through Delilah's family. Within a week, her grandmother had already called Elijah twice, with detailed instructions about what kind of food he was expected to eat at the wedding. "You better come hungry," she teased, "because no man leaves my table without loosening his belt." Delila, half exasperated and half amused, watched as her family wrapped Elijah into their world with open arms. For a man who once thrived in the glittering but empty circles of Chicago's elite, Elijah found himself surprisingly at ease, surrounded by southern warmth. He sat on porches, drinking sweet tea with her uncles, learned the art of saying "yes, ma'am," with just the right inflection from her aunts, and even endured a lesson in barbecue from her cousins. But it wasn't all easy. Delilah's family, protective of her after years of watching her struggle alone, asked the hard questions. Could he truly give up the relentless demands of his empire? Did he understand what it meant to step into a life where children came first, where family outweighed fortune? Elijah answered with humility, not defensiveness, earning their respect little by little. For Delila, it was surreal. She had once imagined her wedding as something polished and distant, a performance meant to impress. But now, standing barefoot in her grandmother's backyard, helping string lanterns between oak trees, she felt something richer. Home. Her children ran across the grass with cousins, laughter ringing through the warm evening air, and for the first time, she could envision a future where joy wasn't fragile but rooted. One evening, as they planned the menu, Elijah leaned close, murmuring against her ear, "This is exactly where I want to marry you. Surrounded by your family, your people, and way too much food." Delila smiled, her eyes soft with both love and disbelief. "You really mean it, don't you?" Elijah kissed her temple. "I've never meant anything more. You, the twins, this family, this is the empire I want to build now." And as her family bustled around them with laughter and music, Delila finally allowed herself to believe it. She was not only marrying Elijah Arnold, but building a life that was truly hers. The morning of the wedding dawned, with sunlight streaming through lace curtains in Delilah's grandmother's house. The air outside hummed with cicadas, mingling with the scent of magnolias drifting from the yard. Delila stood before the mirror in a simple, elegant gown, cream silk that flowed like water, her curls pinned with delicate flowers gathered from her grandmother's garden. Naomi tugged at her skirt, wide-eyed. "Mommy, you look like a princess," she whispered. Delila bent to kiss her daughter's forehead. "No, baby, I look like a bride, and today I get to marry the man who loves us. Outside, the backyard had been transformed into something magical. Lanterns swayed from the branches of ancient oak trees. Strings of lights glowed warmly, and long tables overflowed with food. Barbecue smoked to perfection. Platters of cornbread, collard greens, peach cobbler, and pies that seemed endless. Family bustled about, laughter filling the air, while Noah dashed between cousins, his little suit jacket flapping open. Elijah stood beneath the arbor, his suit simple but sharply cut, his eyes never leaving the house where Delila would soon appear. When Delila stepped into view, his breath caught. She walked slowly, her father's hand steady on her arm, but her gaze locked firmly on Elijah. In that moment, he felt the world still. The vows were not rehearsed, not polished, but they were real. "I never thought love would find me again," Delila said, her voice breaking slightly. "I closed my heart because I thought it was safer. But you, Elijah, you broke down every wall without forcing your way inside. You showed me that love can be steady, patient, and true. And today, in front of everyone who matters most, I choose you." Elijah took her hands, his voice firm though his eyes shimmered. "I've built towers of glass and steel, but none of it compares to what I want to build with you. Delila, you've taught me that success without love is empty. You've given me back my heart, and I promise for the rest of my days to guard yours." When he kissed her, cheers erupted, the twins clapping wildly. The celebration lasted long into the night, music, dancing, food shared, until no one could eat another bite. Elijah had never felt so full, not from the feast, but from the family who embraced him as their own. 1 year later, the house was filled with a different kind of joy. Delila sat on the couch, her rounded belly beneath a flowing dress, while Elijah fussed with pillows to make her comfortable. "Elijah," she laughed, swatting at him playfully, "I'm pregnant, not broken. You're carrying our children," he countered gently, brushing a curl from her face. "That makes you the most important person in the world right now." The twins, Noah and Naomi, sat nearby, excitedly sketching names on scrap paper for their soon-to-arrive siblings. "Mommy, are you having another set of twins?" Noah asked, eyes wide. Delila groaned, though a smile tugged at her lips. "Yeah, that was your father, great ideas." Elijah only grinned, resting a hand on her belly. Months Delila gave birth to another set of twins, 2 healthy babies whose cries filled the hospital room with life. Elijah held them both in his arms, tears streaking his face, overwhelmed by the enormity of it all. In the weeks that followed, Elijah made a decision that startled his board, but not Delila. He stepped back from the company, delegating fully to his trusted executives. His place was no longer in skyscrapers and board meetings. It was at home, rocking their newborns in the middle of the night, sneaking quiet kisses with his wife between feedings, and laughing with Noah and Naomi as they adjusted to being the big siblings. Late one evening, as Delila rested against him with a baby nestled on her chest, Elijah whispered into the stillness, "This is the life I always wanted, but never knew how to find." Delila, her eyes heavy with exhaustion and love, smiled softly. "You found it, Elijah, you found us." And as he held his family close, Elijah Arnold finally understood that the greatest empire he would ever build wasn't made of steel and glass, but of love, laughter, and the people who filled his home. The end. Hope you enjoyed this wonderful story by Green Tea Tales. Please support our channel with like, share, comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.